Hello and welcome to the second lecture of Unit 3. This lecture will go over the southern colonies. These colonies are basically going to be drawing their similarities from the plantation system and slavery. If we look at this map, you can see that the southern colonies are made up of Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. Most of them will all be focusing on these cash crops, tobacco and rice and things like that. They are also going to be located with having port towns and all this kind of stuff. The South's good soil and long growing season were ideal for growing cash crops like tobacco and rice, which require a lot of labor, which we have gone over a lot, which means that they are going to have a lot of slaves. The large plantations were self-sufficient, which means that they had everything they needed. Everything that they needed on a plantation, they grew. So, large cities were not necessary in the South. In the New England colonies, what people would do is they would grow what they could, but then they would go to the market and then trade for what they needed. In the southern colonies, they don't need to go to town or market to trade, so big cities just don't form. So in the north, you're going to have, or in the New England colonies, you're going to have large towns and small farms, but in the southern colonies, you're going to have the opposite. You're going to have large farms and small towns. The planter class was the elite of the society, and the planter class only made up a small portion of the entire society. Elite means that they were like the top of the society, like the top of the pyramid. However, the planter class gained most of the political and economic power, and this is different than New England because in the New England colonies there is a middle class, and in the southern colonies there is not really a middle class. Now, if we as a classroom were the New England colonies, basically, and we were going to split up, $1,000. We would have 4 people, and then 6 people, and then 5 people over here. So these 4 people are going to split up $300. These 6 people are going to split up $500, and then these 5 people are just left with $200 to split. Now, you have the majority of wealth is spread out rather nicely. I mean, these 4 people are going to be the wealthiest, and these 5 people are going to be with the least amount of money. But you have a large portion of the people here in the middle that have a good amount of money, or an average amount of money, and this would be the middle class. So it's evenly spread out. Now, in the southern this is New England. In the southern colonies, you have that same $1,000. If we as a class were going to split it, we have 3 people over here that are going to split $900, and then you have the other 12 people are going to split the rest of the money, the $100. Now, that means that these 3 people have all of the power. They have all of the money. They can do basically a lot of the stuff in like buying up all of the good land and controlling all of the stuff like that. These 12 people basically have no money, and they are going to have a hard time. And some of these people are going to be included in Bacon's Rebellion. So the wealthy own most of the tidewater because, again, these 3 people have all the money, so they're going to buy up all of the tidewater. So the poor were left with the frontier, where they had to fight Native Americans for land. And it's just a terrible life, and they couldn't grow really any crops, and just terrible. So Nathaniel Bacon demanded that the governor help defend the frontier settlements, and the governor refused. Bacon and other frontier people rebelled. They go into Jamestown, they burn Jamestown to the ground, and they're making a little bit of progress, but suddenly Bacon dies of an illness, the rebellion fails, and the governor kind of takes it on himself to just decide he's going to hang these 23 people. And the King of England is not very happy about this. Now, he doesn't really argue with the fact that those people should be hanged, but what he is concerned about is that the royal governor just decided that he was going to hang those 23 people. So he basically fires the governor, recalls him to England, and because of all of this, the House of Burgesses passes laws to prevent a royal governor from gaining such power, from just deciding, we're going to kill people. The royal governor from now on has to have, like a meeting with some people, like decide some things. It has to be a trial, something like that. Search for cheap labor. At first, the planters, the rich elite, tried to use Native Americans, but they died too quickly, like we've talked about. They turned to Africans because they are immune to the diseases. They've worked, they have experience. And that means that the number of African slaves are going to increase over time. Now, in 1665, there were fewer than 500 African slaves in the colonies. And by 1750, only 100 years later, basically, less than 100 years later, there are more than 235,000 African slaves. That's a huge, huge increase. Things were really bad living in slavery, and I don't feel that we need to spend a lot of time talking about that right now. We are going to hit on that later on, but in the book it talks about the conditions, which I'm sure you mostly are aware of. The Stono Rebellion, because things were so, bad, a lot of slaves wanted to rebel, and one of those rebellions is the Stono Rebellion. The group of 20 slaves rebel, they march south, they start killing planters and burning plantations, and this and other rebellions lead to stricter slave codes. Basically, because they rebel and kill people, they basically have stricter laws on the poor treatment of slaves. Basically, now they say, do whatever you need to do to keep them in line so people don't, rebel. In the North, wealth was evenly distributed. Like when we talked about the $1,000 and the, 300, 500, and then 200. In the South, there were only a handful of people that had the money. So $1,000, we have the 900, and then you have the 100 over here. Like I said in the beginning, the North had small farms and large towns, and the South had large farms and small towns. So this slide right here is pretty important, because if you are talking about the differences between the North and the South, or New England and the Southern colonies, this is the slide to look for. All right, so that is the end of Lecture 2.